do from, this ride and going forward every year that I do it will be thinking about him. And I think it's an illustration too of just how close to home this is. Here I am trying to fight this thing, trying to help, trying to fight my own battle. And then my brother loses that fight ultimately, and understanding, look, whatever led up to my brother's final conclusion, one of the biggest problems was he had this compulsion in his brain that we couldn't figure out how to shut off chemically. And we tried. He had the medicine, he had the shrinks and all that stuff, but also he could never sleep. And not being able to sleep is not good for anybody's well-being. And so you have these things that stack, and maybe each one of them individually you could tolerate, but he just had too many things in his stack, and it finally was too much for him. My brother was tough. He's a little brother, and quite a bit little, because he's like 5.5 years younger than me. And so, we played pretty rough, and he got hurt all the time, and he built resilience from that experience. And to know that he had too much, and it was definitely too much. It was a lot for him to carry.
Right. And you're right. And I think just every little bit that you're doing, but just the fact that it is a daily struggle.
Yeah.
So it's not something that you really necessarily beat and it goes away. It's always just kind of sitting there on the back burner. So.
Well, I'm on my soapbox here. Let me say this too, to people who want to help somebody else, and you say things that, look, you mean well, and you say, hey, reach out before you do it. Right. That's not the way to do it. When someone's hanging on to the end of their rope, you can't ask them to let go of something and call you. It's on you to be ahead of it before they get to the end of the rope. If they're at the end of the rope, when I would text my brother and I'd say, hey man, how you doing today? And he's like, terrible. All right, now what do I do? I mean, what do you do with that message? I can't sleep. I mostly want to die. I'm trying to make it through today. Well, keep trying. When you have that experience and you realize how helpless you are, man, you got to get way out in front of it. So the people in your lives that need help, and we're stubborn, like all people. No one wants to lose control. No one wants to admit their weakness, but especially veterans. We're just not wired for that. And so we don't ask people just to reach out. Reach out yourself, way before they get in trouble. If you think of someone that you love, reach out and talk to them. I think that's a more reliable form of medicine than asking somebody else to do something. And don't tell me you don't have time, because that person will run out of time, and then you really won't have time. That's
right. There it goes. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad we took care of that and talked about that, because it's an important thing, and I think this is a good source to find help and support and that kind of stuff from the people who are actually kind of suffering from it. So I appreciate your effort. I think you're doing the right thing. So good.
And then down below is that link. You can go to the fundraiser, and I'll put it in the show notes here too. So if you're watching live, you can go into the comments and you can see it there. But yeah, I mean, that's the best way to dig in. And look, if you don't have time or anything else, it doesn't take a lot of money, just a little bit of money from a lot of people. It enables us to do things like, look, I got a buddy in Chicago who's a gun in the mouth kind of guy, and he's actively fighting right now to stay alive. And this has been this way for a long time. That money goes, I could say, like, hey man, get on this airplane, come out, let's get some people around you, let's go fishing or whatever it is, the thing that we're able to give them. Fishing is our home thing. We can do that for someone. And I mean, what's a flight cost? Is it $500? Which, well, I mean, you're going to need more than $500 to bury this person, to care for their family. I mean, would you give $50 to save someone's life? Yeah. Well, then this is what we're doing. Right. And we, we're not going to let a stupid airline flight stop us from grabbing somebody who needs help and getting them going in the right direction, putting some real counseling into their head. Like, hey, quit being stubborn. Let's save your life here. Stop worrying about all these other things. You are the most important priority right now. And that's what some of this money goes to. Some of it goes to other ways to supporting the families. We're just doing our damnedest to try to make veterans want to live,
Right. Well, I don't know how to transition from that.
What?
Yes. Okay. Damn.
Slam cut to us having a party. I don't know, whatever.
So, when I tell people that I was counterintelligence, I get isolated questions, random questions. So I figured that's what I was going to compile. I was going to come up with things that sounded interesting to other people and then throw them out to you and see if it starts a conversation. So the first thing is covertness, the secrecy level, the secrecy spectrum on the job, right? it changes from environment to environment. For example, in Bosnia was a great first step for us because it wasn't necessarily covert. I mean, we're not black ops anyway. We're not deep cover anyway. And really, all that we really need is just that one high level, unverifiable cover that justifies our presence, right? But in Bosnia, it was a little bit easier because people were so happy to see us. People were so happy to see guys with weapons that we're pointing them at them.
Yeah,
they were forthcoming. They're whatever you want to know. So, but not every environment is going to be like that. Like my next step was Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Now, Riyadh is the capital, right? So, and being the capital, that's where the embassy complexes are. So really it's like Vegas for foreign intelligence. You really didn't know who you were talking to. If you didn't vet that person or you didn't know that as a reliable source, you had to just assume that this was not the right person to talk to. I mean, and by talk to, I mean, release any of your personal information. I mean, I can say, yeah, my mom and dad retired here and my wife lives here, but this is not information that you want to show up in somebody's report. So you got to keep that close to the vest. And, and I don't know, it's difficult to elicit information while you're trying to be covert. It takes finesse, right? And you have to control the conversation. You have to manipulate the conversation. All the things that are kind of antisocial. That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're looking for the person who reacts and says, "Why are you asking me this again?" You know, you're kind of trying to avoid that, and it's so it takes constant focus and attention. And so with that, I kind of hit both extremes. I had Bosnia and then I had Saudi. Now with you, post 9/11, where on the secrecy spectrum did that land?
I got more and more closer to being Pete, and I'm not going to say I didn't manipulate conversations, but I by design tried not to. I wanted to, because they know more things than I could ever know, and what I think I know, you know, maybe that's a C+ level of information that I might get out of them. But if I just shut up and let them guide me to where I knew something would be, boy, and I was less of a dick about it. I was less antisocial about it. And here's the thing that I learned, Greg, along the way is that for the most part, and Larry Yukmanovich and I just talked about this last night, there's not a school for this stuff, right? You have to OJT it. You have to be immersed. And luckily, we're folksy. We can go out and talk to people. But for people that aren't, how do you build that capacity? And what I'd say is if you focused on trust and getting to know the person you're talking to, and sometimes you don't have time. Sometimes you meet a person once and that's the only time you ever talk to them. You got to be ready for that. That's a slightly different skill set, but they're akin. If you focus on building trust and you can exchange trust verifiably, and here's the thing, it's like, I always say this, but it's going to remain to be a main lesson. Someone will say, well, first you establish rapport. And I'm talking like Bart. First you establish rapport, and then you establish trust, and then you move on. Well, how the fuck do I know if I have rapport and trust? You know, I mean, I've watched guys who think they have rapport and trust, and you watch them and you're like, that guy was pissed off at you the entire time you're there. Did you not notice him shuffling his papers like you were wasting his damn time? No, that guy loves me. You're like, does he? How do you know? How do you know? You know, and so I would just slow down the whole process, and whoever I was going to partner with for an extended period of time, even if it's like 5 or 6 meetings, I would make my point to be interesting to them through who I was by being honest about me, but also being interested in how their life was and what was important to them, just like I would any of my friends. I looked at them when they talked. I didn't ask. I tried to never ask the obvious question of like, where are the bombs? Where are the bad guys? You know, I would focus on everything but the PIRs, because the PIRs are dumb. They're written by people who've never collected information in their life, and they're much too direct. You can never go directly for the thing you want when you first meet somebody. If I came up to you and I said, hey, who's the worst shithead you know? And where's that son of a bitch at? Will you introduce me to him? You're going to be like, I don't know who the fuck you even are. What are you doing? But that's kind of how we approach that job. And if that isn't the first question, it also shouldn't be the 100th question. You have to build this thing. You have to not take a strategic approach, but you have to take an approach that is, it's a dangerous place. Very, very dangerous place. And if you don't understand that going in and you think you can outwit people, then you're the dumbest person in the room.
Right. Now, but it's odd. Don't you think there's a kind of a dichotomy that's happening here? Because spying is a crime. I mean, there's countries where, spies are executed.
Yeah.
But you're in a combat situation, right?
Yeah.
You're in war and I got intel right here. Who wants to trade intel?
Yeah.
And it's just, it's counterintuitive to what you would expect it to be.
Right. Yeah. When we deployed to Bosnia, they were like, you can't say you're anything other than, the best cover you can have is I'm with security. Right. Which I don't know who cooked that shit up. There should have been something better, than saying that. But we were like, wait, what do you mean? We can't lie? Like right from the start, we had never been trained in this, wait, we're supposed to go up and say it. And so I ran with that over my career too. Like if they would say, but you're a spy, right? And I'm like, yes, I'm here to ask questions. And if I ask a question you don't like, don't answer it. If you want me never to come back, I'll never come back. My point here is to protect people. You, me, everybody else. I'm trying to make everybody's lives better, trying to find out the things that we can do to improve things. That's what America's here to do, right? In general. Yes. We want to attack the Taliban. I'm probably never going to ask any questions about that because that might put you in danger, and usually I would ask that question with a slight hook in it, does helping us to attack the Taliban, and I wouldn't ask a closed question like this, but does that put you in danger with the Taliban? And then the answer is always like, yes, those guys are dangerous, please. And I'm like, is it safe to talk to me now? Will they get mad at you? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And then I would kind of level the security part, but I'm worried about their security first. And that gave me an advantage over any other collector because I didn't go straight for, I hate to say it, this is the way I say it. You don't go straight for the pussy. You spend a few minutes talking to the person, maybe plying them with some drinks or whatever it's going to be. But if you go straight in, which is what we think we need to do all the time, you don't control the conversation. Yep. Yeah, yes, I'm always in control of what's going on. I'm always getting things that I want to get. We're talking about ultimately the things that I care about, but I don't know what those things are until I'm having the conversation. And there are dichotomies everywhere with all of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think you had the luxury to be idealistic. I mean, some of these are not necessarily like in Saudi, these were social events. You're at a party. So these are not designed meets. You're talking to somebody cold. Yeah. And so there is kind of, there is an uncertainty and, and not that you have to build paranoia into your job, but sometimes it's kind of good as a safety net. So because it's too different because in Saudi, I'm wearing this. I'm not wearing the BDUs. You don't see McGowen on my chest, that kind of thing. So it is a little bit different. But that's what makes the job interesting because depending on what the environment is, it kind of the way you go about your job is dependent on what the environment is and what the environment is providing to you. So it's a different thing. And I think that's what's interesting because in the 90s, we could see how this was evolving. Counterintelligence or intelligence gathering, terrorism, etc. So we could see how it was, and it's kind of like the Cold War. After the Cold War, after the wall came down, intelligence was never going to be the same. Right. After 9/11, intelligence gathering is never going to be the same. So you kind of seeing it on that back end that I didn't get a chance to see.
Yeah. Let me say this too, because this model that I did, I got to test unit after unit after unit after unit, and I stayed at the ground level, right? And so I got way, way smart on how to do day-to-day ground operations because I did them all the time. Before all of that happened, after Bosnia, the next thing I did as a counterintelligence agent on the ground doing things was I came back into the Army in the reserves, and I was in a transportation billet. So this means that I was the guy in charge of the truck drivers who drove trucks around. So I was called an 88 November at the time. I'm sure it's a different number now. But the whole goal was to get in and get to an intel unit, which shortly after this deployment I did. By Christmas we deployed. This is post 9/11. It's October 2001. So by Christmas time, I'm in this new intel unit. So just a matter of a few weeks, right? But I got to deploy, and the NCOs who were above me, there were two of them, were tricky, and they're like, haha, we've taken all of the good jobs, and then the E4s have been divided amongst us, and you basically have no job in between. And I'm like, this is perfect for me because I don't want to do this work. And so I went over to the counterintelligence office knowing that they'd be short-staffed. And I had to do a little bit of a dance to get in there because the LT that worked there, he didn't know me and didn't believe me that I was a counterintelligence agent. And I'm like, look, I'm not gainfully employed. I'm a counterintelligence agent. I'm glad to come over here. I'm sure we can work something out with my bosses to make sure that I can help you guys. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And he blew me off. And I'm like, let me just poke my head into the office and see if I know anybody or know anybody who knows anybody. And it turns out one of the guys in there I had just worked with maybe a year and a half prior at Fort Huachuca, because I left Huachuca in 98. So, this story is getting a little bit long. Actually, no, 99, right? So I'd seen this guy fairly recently before, and he's like, Pete! And he recognized me right away. And so then I look back at the LT, and he's like, oh, shit, I guess I was wrong. This guy he's legit. I had worked with this counterintelligence warrant officer, secondarily, like he and his peer was my boss. And we are all in these specialty classes, counterintelligence, force protection, source operations, CIFSO classes where I was. He was in something similar. John Murray was down the hallway from us teaching counterterrorism, another guy that's been on the show. Anyhow, I can't remember this warrant's name right now off the top of my head, but he's like, hey, I've got a great job for you. You don't have any responsibility. You don't have to write any reports, but I've got really green agents. I just want you to go along and just kind of observe them and then see what you can pick up without like specifically worrying about collecting anything. It was a great job for me because I could sit there and just kind of like be advisory. And so what I did was I went on these every day. We'd go on these MWR trips. We were in Egypt on the Sinai Peninsula, and we would go into the pyramids or go to the Antiquities Museum or go to Saqqara, all these places, right? And again, keep in mind, this is post 9/11. We don't know when the next attack is going to happen or anything. And these are areas that had been targeted recently. So this is what a CIA agent does. The next thing you know, I've become buddies with Dr. Zawas. This is the guy that you see in History Channel talking about Egypt and Egyptology and all that stuff. He wears this hat. He's a brand in and of himself. And at the time, he was the minister of antiquities for all of Egypt. And so this guy and I became best buddies. Every day I'd show up, he'd be there. We'd walk around and talk about things. And so I got not only a fantastic walk around course on Egyptian history, but also like what were they doing for counterterrorism, which is right in our wheelhouse. I mean, that's a perfect thing. So I didn't have to do anything, but I knew how to get to that guy and make friends with him in a way that he wanted to talk to me basically every day, and then say, hey, you guys should do this. Matter of fact, I'm going to take this tour and take you over here to Saqqara. And I wish there was a French archaeologist who was like 100 years old there who owned that site for archaeology. I wish he was there, but he's not. He's like 96 years old. He's been there for 50 years. He's the guy to talk to, but I'm going to take you guys there and give you guys a special thing. And so he was like bending over backwards to give me personally this special experience. Like, I'm going to take you into the mummy room, and all these other things that like no one else got access to. That's counterintelligence. That's doing your job day in, day out. Did I ask him where the bombs were? Like I might have said, hey, how do you guys do security in this gigantic area? But he showed me, but I wasn't specifically collecting. I wasn't focused on PIRs. I was focused on being a good dude, making the doctor feel interesting, putting him in his comfortable spot. I don't have to do anything other than if I can let him be himself, and that allows me to do my job through his work. Oh my God, that's it. That's a home run.
Right. Now with that, did you have officers, like in Bosnia, we had some officers who just like to hang out with the CI guys.
Yeah.
And those guys were great guys. So I didn't mind that. I like those, and still I have good memories of those guys. Now in other offices, they weren't always nice guys. They were kind of, loitering, and gosh, and in our office in Saudi, we had a phone line out. Mm-hmm. So this is an open line. So this is huge. This is the 90s, where the cell phones were, this big. And so having a phone line out is a big thing. And this guy, and I don't know what he was waiting on. I don't know if he thought Bond girls were going to arrive or what, but he just thought it was a tough thing to kind of hang out with the CI guys. But then he found out we had a phone. And then he would be there every day. And okay, this is a weird story. He had psoriasis, right? Poor guy. But he would come and talk to his wife for half an hour, and he would descale himself. And so every day I would sit at my desk and I'd have dead skin all over my desk, you know. So it's so transitioning from there, creepy officer guys. How many guys have you had that kind of loitered through your offices? Guys who kind of who were I don't know, preventing you from doing your job?
Yeah, there's a lot of forms of that person too, right? There's the captain who's like, no, you can't have this ICF money. You're gonna steal it and go to jail. You're like, no, your job is to shut up and just hand me the money, and then I'll take care of the rest. What do you mean you don't have receipts? Yeah, it's a combat zone, motherfucker. They don't give receipts for $5 items around here. It's just not a thing. I promise you that dollar amount is below the, you know, all these guys that get in your way, right? They are one of the biggest problems with the entire thing. The fact that commanders in intel people, like, so when I worked at Huachuca, one of the things, because I knew about computers, which really meant that I had deployed and I'd used a laptop and I was comfortable with it, and I knew how to make a picture print out, that I would go to the OBC, the Officer Basic and Officer Advanced course students who were coming through the intel school, and they're like, show them this and take a picture. But I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to explain what I do, because they're worried about, like, how do I deploy these tools? They'd never met a counterintelligence agent, especially not one that had deployed. And so I'd say, I'm a counterintelligence agent. I use this laptop. I use this field kit, this camera thing. Do you guys need me to show you how to take a picture with the digital camera? They're like, no, we don't care about that. I'm like, would you like to know how to use me? Or where do you think you would use me? And they're like, well, you should be by the Turkey 32. And I'm like, you don't want me anywhere on the line of battle. You want me in front of it, off to the side of it. You want me, what you want is for me to show up and you're like, hey, where the fuck have you been? You know, and then I'm like, let me tell you where I've been. I've been in the coffee shops. I've been, you know, having barbecues. I've been invited to 15 weddings, all these things. That's what you want. And it would blow their minds. Greg, they would have no idea that that's what I was supposed to be doing. That the more time I spent not doing what they were doing, the more I can get in front of them and tell them, like, your job, my job is to give the commander information on how to win. You know, and if that means undermining the enemy's ability to attack us or terrorize people or whatever, that's all part of that winning equation. So it doesn't have to all be threat related. That's another big thing I learned. But that those officers that got in our way stopped getting in my way when I got better at my job, because I would go into the commander. Usually the commander, I would start at the battalion level. If I worked for the brigade commander, same thing. You know, but I had this thing that I would say to them. I'm like, I learned this from you guys. I learned how to speak commander. You know, here's what's going to happen. You're going to put me in the 3 shop under some captain. That's not the right place for me, but that'll work for right now. I'm going to go out, and in 3 weeks, you'll see my reports. Everybody gets them. And if there's somebody who needs to be added to the list, let me know. My point is to get these reports out to everybody. They're raw. They're not analyzed, but it's what I'm seeing on the ground. You're going to get what I do, and you're going to need it. And then in 3 months, you're going to look at me. I'm going to look at you, and you're going to say, Pete, you're the #1 force multiplier I have. We couldn't have done this without you. You don't have to say that, because I'm saying that we're going to say it now. Every single commander I said that to looked at me 3 months later and they're like, you know what? I'm like, I know. And I'm just going to sit on this couch, because now I have open couch access. Because you're going to say anytime you want to talk to me, because I need them to tune me in, right? Because I'm so laser focused, I might need to be the left, right. He knows things vertically I don't know. And when the commanders got that, they left me alone, or they provisioned me. I'm going to give you this platoon. You can go out wherever you want. I'm going to go out every day. You're going to tell me where to go. We'll use my security detail to go wherever you want to go. I need to, like, they wanted me to, and sometimes I didn't need them to go, but I turned that annoying 03 or 04 into a colonel saying, how can I get you more access to the battle space? That's what I was able to do. But then I had to learn how to speak commander. And the other thing I had to learn is not to undermine the staff, because they will kill you when you're not there. Right. And so you don't give suggestions. You just give information. I would make the commander beg me, please, Pete, please tell me what to do. And I'm like, hey, the staff is going to undermine me. I'm not going to be around to protect myself. And they're going to make it so that I can't help you anymore. And they're like, you know what? I'm the commander. They'll never do that. You're my guy. And as soon as they said that they would protect me, most of the time that happens. Sometimes not. I've been kicked off a lot of camps too, Greg. I mean, over time, because you will rub the wrong person the wrong way, and they'll kick you off the camp, and, you know, try to kick you out of theater because you made a colonel mad, or because I'm playing at the major leagues.
Right.
So that person turned into higher ranking people, and they still tried to undermine you. But if I had the commander's attention, which I should, because I'm collecting information from them, and if they thought I was valuable, nobody could do anything to me. It didn't matter. And I wasn't doing things to harm anyone, but people who have egos, people who are 06s,
That's
and
it.
some dude named Pete just said something contrary to everything they thought was true. So I got in trouble one time, where there's email was going around. It was talking about wheat seed distros. Wheat seed distros are a mess, and they've been going on for years, and they've always been a mess. So when I hear wheat seed distro, my radar pops off like, aha, this is something that I can help with, because these guys don't know what they're doing, right? Because we don't train on it. We just have these half-assed, untrained beliefs. And so we go through, and this colonel, 06, who's, for the audience, 06 is one step below general. He was talking about the guy I talked to every day that I had built trust with, and he was like, "Hey, this guy's a piece of shit. He's with the Taliban. He's gonna steal this wheat seed from other farmers. He's gonna make money on it, right?" And so I said, "Actually, here's what's actually going on. Because I was at the meetings when they're talking about this, and it wasn't at all what he said. But I challenged him, since he wrote this thing publicly. I responded publicly, and then apparently the words that I used that got me in the most trouble, unlike Colonel McGowen, I actually know what's going on here. And then I laid it all out, point for point, bam, 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 bam. So he lost his mind. He went to the boss, and he's like, "That guy's got to go home. He's a problem. He's embarrassed me and everything else." And it was all about that guy's ego. And so there's a guy called the DCO. He's the number 2 guy in the brigade, and he comes over to my boss, and he's like, "Well, Pete's got to go home. Sorry." And my guy's like, "Nah, you know what? I got a big ass. You can go ahead and chew on it for a while. We're going to see about that." Right. And so they went at it. And the guy yelled at my boss. My boss took a lot of vomit. And at the end, he's like, "You show me in that email where Pete was wrong, and I'll send him home." And the guy's like, "God damn it." Fucking left. And that was the end of it. But that's the razor's edge. If I had a wrong kind of boss, I would have been going home.
Right. Now, when we went through school, and then you taught it as well, and I know you weren't putting the syllabuses together, but I mean, learning in counterintelligence was, it's a trial and error thing, because when we went to school, I think our final exam was how to do a recorded statement, which is something that I never did. So, I mean, do you think if more of these officers were aware of what the actual job is, that it would be easier for you to do your job, or really, and even the instructors at the intelligence schools, sometimes I'm not even sure if they know exactly what counterintelligence is. So, I mean, what do you think is the best way to help spies be spies, productive spies?
I mean, given the basics that you give them at the schoolhouse, which is always changing, right? Like, it's not that you can reliably. I didn't work at the 10-level course. This is for everybody. I didn't work at the place where they made spies. I worked at the place where we trained them in newer skills, right? But I also went through the training that Greg was talking about, and I worked above that training level. So I watched them try to sort out what was next. And as budget things and other requirements came down, the training program was always being compressed. Can't you do this in less than 17 weeks? And you're like, no, all of these are all important skills. The thing about our job, and this, is it's so varied. The experience that a person brings in might have nothing to do what's in vogue for the Army right now to teach. So and the other thing is look, our job is hard. It's dangerous. And look, I work in a tent to this day. It's not the most comfortable thing. I'm sweating like crazy. I've got an ice pack on my thigh to keep my blood kind of cool, right? People don't want to do this. They want to get that cakey job going to Saudi Arabia, or going to the embassy, or working at the 902nd or the 66th. There are all these things. I never got to do any of that stuff. But when you go to the schoolhouse, they'll talk about these things that you might get an assignment or two down the road. Maybe you're lucky and you get it right from the jump and you stay strategic your whole time. But I would submit that a tactical collector, pound for pound, is the most valuable and the most challenging job. All the rest of them are some level of cakiness above, right? And I'm not talking bad about that. If you look down, though, and you've been at the 902nd for 20 years, you're like, those guys, they don't do shit. They're dumb. They're stupid. They're not as good. There's a lot of ego in these things. So even if we taught them the right things at the schoolhouse, it's too hard to manage the chaos that goes into that 15, 16, 12, however long, right? And however many subjects get jammed in each day, you know, nobody knows what they're doing. It's just like, okay, we're going to teach report writing. Well, how long does that take? Fuck, I don't know. You know, like we would go to I was just saying this last night to Larry. We would go to a Schaffenburg, and I mean, even more simply, we would go to range density, but everybody was supposed to shoot all the weapons, so you knew how to handle any weapon you might come across. Half of us didn't even shoot 9mm, right? And so you go to the schoolhouse and you go to train on how to interrogate or interview somebody or whatever it's going to be. You may not even do but one interview that entire time, you know. And so and in your career in training, maybe you do 10 role play interviews that you're actively doing something with someone, and that person isn't taught to like stay ahead of you and make it hard and challenge you and make you grow. It's like, let's just do this thing. So it's really more of a familiarization thing. And it's almost like grading your own PT test. You know, like you have this thing that's very simple. It doesn't create the challenges of being somewhere else and doing it in a different environment. So I don't know that you can improve what we do. I think you have to do it once they're actually agents. And I think what that means is spending a lot of time in other countries, not fooling around, but a little bit of fooling around, just being in different places so you know how to blend in, meet people, and just learn how to be, because not everybody's built for that, right? And learn how to be good at going to a different culture and operating in a way that makes you valuable to the people around you. Because if you do that, they'll always tell you what you need to know.
Right. Now, as far as the culture, you know, I always thought it was kind of lucky. It would be great to go to Venice, you know, and spend a couple of years or something. But we got the opportunity to see cultures that really, you know, for better or worse, maybe aren't the ideal vacation spots. So
Right.
and I'm proud of that. I think that was great. I you know, whether it's Saudi, whether it was Jordan, any of those things, I kind of like going to the odder spots, like, you know, Egypt, Afghanistan, etc. So now,
Right.
as far as their culture, I mean, how difficult or how different did it make your job dependent on the culture itself and going to talk to people and that sort of thing? Is the culture that you came up against, was that a hindrance in doing your job?
There are two ways to look at this. It's one is our culture and then their culture. And
Right.
then the thing that about culture, look, and I'm pretty advanced on this, so I'm going to try to explain it in a way that makes sense, but I don't know that I can explain it because a lot of this stuff is just rote action for me at this point. It's not about avoiding offense. It's about understanding that you're working with a different culture and seeing it and accepting it for what it is. Doesn't mean you condone the actions that you see, but these people got to this point through a series of actions that you can't relive. And so you have to take at face value that what these folks are doing they're doing because of a design that was outside of their control for the most part. So when you go to see someone, and just to use an extreme example, men and boys have sex in Arab culture quite often. It's a reliable thing you can find. You can be offended by it. And then when you hear like the pearl clutchers, like, oh my gosh, you have to do something about that. No, I don't. No, I don't. I'm the one going out in this dangerous place. And you want me to focus on that? There's a thing called ethical saturation. This is my concept, not anybody else's, where if you try to do the right thing all the time, the ethical thing, like, oh, I got to stand on ethics here and prevent this man from having sex with this boy, you will flip that ethical requirement and you will do the harmful thing as
Right.
opposed to the right thing. And so you can only pick and choose. These are dangerous places. What you think is normal in Poughkeepsie or in, you know, Palm Springs, it's not, it doesn't apply at the other place. And so you tone that down a little bit and you go between Poughkeepsie and Palm Springs, same things apply. Like you can't go into Palm Springs and just start telling them they have to do different things because you're not from there. And so your job as an agent is to go in and see what's going on and then use that difference not to worry about offense. Look, I eat left-handed all the time because I eat left-handed quite often, right? And I would say, hey, I'm going to eat left-handed. Is that a big deal to you guys? And then basically they would say this, Pete, you're from America. You don't have to eat like we eat. And so what you don't do is you don't try to out Iraq and Iraqi. You don't try to out Afghan and Afghan, dude. That's what we're taught, though. It's like, hey, make sure you don't put your hand in this symbol. This means we want to fight, whatever it is, right? You're like, yeah, I don't know. You know, you ask about Ramadan, even if you know everything about Ramadan, you ask about Ramadan so they can explain how their family does it. You don't know more than everybody else. You're just like, I don't know the first thing. I'd love to understand more. Hey, why do you guys in Afghanistan all wear these long vests? Fuck, man, we don't know. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't wear those things, and then they get a kick out of it. It looks like you're getting, like, it makes you laugh. So you're like, I've got a question for you, and I want you to ask questions to me. And then they're like, let me ask you a question. Right. And this question came up a lot. You're from California or you're from Florida. Do girls wear bikinis all the time? Yes, they do. To school? Well, yes. Whatever it was, you have these conversations. And what I'm looking for is the cultural path. And if I can find a path that leads to a good outcome for me, I don't have to invent one for them, then I'm going to take that path with them, and I'm just going to pay the bill to the commander by letting them do what they normally do and just extract little things from it and ask little questions along that path, so that for them, they're just showing me the path, Yeah, like here's a great example. The ag teams from America would come and try to change how they do agriculture. So I go to the O4, it's a major, and I say, hey, what's the market chain from that dude to the person that buys it? Fuck if I know. And then why are you fucking with it? Why are you trying to change something you don't know? Do you understand what these guys do to bring their crop to market? Nope. Don't care. Not my orders. And I'm like, well, then there you go. So that person maybe never eats with his left hand, but he's an asshole. And the only reason why I know he's an asshole is because I talk to these guys, and like they're like, co-op. And I'm like, they have a co-op. No, we don't. Well, those 5 farmers in that valley, see those 5 farms? They all go in together at harvest time because they're all kin. And they rent a truck, and they put all their pomegranates that they don't sell through the broker. By the way, there are brokers here, and they drive all those pomegranates into town on that truck. And you know what their biggest problem is? Making sure that nobody robs them along the way. You want to help agriculture? Don't invent a new system. Improve the one that they have, or convince them that, hey, it's safer than you realize. You're not going to get robbed. Now let's focus on that, instead of saying, here's how you grow and sell pomegranates. Like, dude, these guys have been doing it for generations. So that's how culture works, is you don't invent a new one. You work within theirs. You learn what's acceptable. And as you learn what's acceptable, you do have to adapt, because you can't just be some rube who can't learn, right? But that expectation is a lot slower of a ramp than you might realize.
Right. Now, when you were going and dealing with the bullshit and dealing with the different cultures on a personal basis, did you have epiphanies? Did you have moments of clarity about your own culture when you see how other cultures were evolving and doing the things? I mean, what did you realize about yourself, about us?
Yeah, so many things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is by the way, yo, Dickie, what's up? I love Dickie, always comes in. Here's some of the things I realized. One was what we thought we were accomplishing, we weren't accomplishing. And it's Greg, it's the farmer. These are the most practical people on earth, wherever the country they're in. And this one guy says to me, and it's, by the way, this man has half of a tooth. The rest of it, it's a U shape. The rest of it is rotted out. And there's like stuff that's part of his body that should be covered by enamel and dentin that's exposed. And I'm like, so this guy can't even like protect his teeth. But he can say this to me: you guys have been here for almost 10 years. And there's no high tension electricity, transferring system here. I can light the dirt in my yard on fire. There's so much oil on the ground. How can you, the Americans, fail at this? You guys have all the money in the world. You spent he said to me, you spent $1 trillion here, and there's not a high tension power cable system to transmit energy. And I take that with some of my images of how they transmit energy, and I deliver that to the commander, and I'm like, bam, you want a problem? And then every person I talk to, and I can say this every time, says electricity sucks here. And then another guy will say, how long would your government work if there was no reliable electricity? And I'm like, I don't know, 8 minutes? We would lose our minds. And so you realize that, like, what we're briefing to ourselves about our success and everything is mostly bullshit. And then when someone says to me, you guys come here with these ideas, but your divorce rate, look how your women are exposed in all of your culture. And you guys act like women are empowered. That's disgusting. You guys you make a commitment to God and you don't stick with it with your, and this isn't Pete saying this. This is this guy saying this to me. And I'm like, yep. I'll say amazing things like, you guys have had the right for women to vote for only 100 years. Who are you to tell us how to do anything? You guys have just now figured some of these things out. We'd like to be better, but we have to be safe first. Safety before everything else. So all these things that we bring, women's empowerment, I've written peer-reviewed paper on women's empowerment. You know, we're out of scope, we're out of step, and it's inappropriate for us to bring these things to them because we've only started to figure this stuff out for ourselves, and even we can't agree on that. So why are we bringing this to somebody else? Rule of law is another thing. You have to have rule of law. They have rule of law. It just doesn't look like yours. It's tribal. It's not penal. We have a penal system. There's no proof that penal is the right way to go. You know, like, and we want to build a penal system in another country. How are you going to collect taxes in a district on the Afghan map that we don't even see? We've graded out as if it doesn't exist, but there actually are people there. You're going to send a tax collector to that place that we're terrified to go to? Be like, hey, the government of Afghanistan elect your taxes now. I mean, come on, that guy doesn't go there because he knows if I go there, I'm never coming back. Right. That's a long answer. Sorry.
So, no, I get what you're saying. Now, did you ever bump heads with other intelligence agencies? You know, because I know in Bosnia, you and I, we had the first source operation in Bosnia.
Right.
And we had that for a couple of months, and then the CIA came in and poached it.
Yeah.
Did you have instances where, you know, you were bumping heads with other agencies that were trying to do the same thing to a certain extent?
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing didn't really have to deal with all of that. So I was able to I don't mind finding. Here's the thing: I'm matured. I understood that if I find someone and they're valuable to an agency that's really above me in terms of the level of control and access to things, hey, take them. I'll go. I mean, I found somebody good. I'm good at my job. I'll go find somebody else. Right. I didn't get a whole lot of that. But what I did learn to do was I would find all of the intel players on the camp and just say, hey, I'm Pete. If I can ever be of value to you, I can do a lot of things. I can play in gray areas. I can communicate vertically. I can go into, you know, whatever. And then they would say, oh, that's awesome. And sometimes they needed my help, and other times they didn't. The human guys, they were the hardest ones to blend with because they were so focused on their commanders' PIRs, they didn't have the sophistication to understand how to work with me and improve their ability. So mostly what I was like, here I am. I'm like this, special consultant to you guys. I can fill gaps no matter what. I'm going to go out. I'm going to write reports. I will give you all of my reports. It's never a problem with that. If there's something you see, like me to do differently, if you want to challenge something, hey, I'm all about it. I can withstand the rigor. And for the most part, they were never a problem, but they also weren't really a value add for the most part.
Right.
For the most part, look, human teams were playing a lower level game than I was playing. And God bless, but they're just white belts. And you can't go to white belts and offer to help them as a black belt because they don't want to hear that, you're doing this wrong. You know, like they want to go out and do the thing that they do. And here's the God's honest truth. Most human teams, I'm saying most, are irrelevant to their commander. And that's a shame, but I can't fix that if they're not willing to have that be fixed. I can't fix that if they want to accept that's true.
Why is that, you think? I mean, why are they
don't know what they're doing? They don't have professional training. They go out and they focus on one or two things. They're not reliable at getting it. And look, I could go out and collect as much intel as them. I'll go out and patrol. They go on and I'll bring back better intel because I'm better at it. I've done it hundreds more times than they have in way more places. And so I would try to never like tell them that to their face because a lot of times they their feelings hurt and you get kicked off camp. But my job, if I got something threat related, I'm like, oh, I got the perfect guy for you to talk to. Go talk to Tony over there. He loves that kind of information. I'm not really into that, which is great for me because I got to lower my, what we would call heat stakes. I got to lower my thing in the area. Like, hey, Pete's not interested in that stuff. That guy is the guy to talk to. So hopefully they go to him with that. And then I could focus on the things that I knew the commander needed more than, look, the reality is in Iraq and Afghanistan, we could never reliably find the enemy and destroy them. And look, that's every commander's job, right? Find and destroy the enemy. And they couldn't reliably do it. I don't know how many days in a row it would be like, we haven't even encountered the Taliban that we know about, So find and destroy, close with and destroy. That wasn't a thing. We couldn't do that. It would be like the first line item, right? Close with and destroy the enemy. Well, I can't help you do that because you guys can't do that yourselves, and I can't do that by myself. So I'm going to focus on other things. Doesn't mean I didn't collect on threat, but I didn't focus on it. And the next line would be protect the force. Well, I certainly can help with that. And then the next thing would be teach and train the local, like the indigenous population in either governance or policing or soldiering. And then the last line was enable the enablers who really work on the line above that. And that's that 4-line set, that mission set, that was everybody. Everybody said that. And so I didn't worry about that top line because everybody, Greg, everybody's focused on threats. So you go into like the operation center, and you look around on the walls, you see like looking for this bad guy, shadowy shape, looking for this bad guy, shadowy shape, this SIG act, danger, danger, danger. And I'm like, who is the most important person in the valley here? We don't know. Well, why aren't you looking for him? You know what? I'll go find him. Who is the businessman who is financing some of these operations? Afghans don't finance things. And I'm like, you want to bet? You want to bet? Who is the shadow governor? I don't know. Let's go talk to the real governor and figure out what limits his ability to do his job. That's what we're here to do, right? Yeah, we'll find the shadow governor. Turns out sometimes the shadow governor is the governor because he's also the shadow. He's also the governor because he's in the right place and he just doubles his job. He's like, yeah, I do backdoor deals. I do front door deals, whatever. So it's a long answer and it's a complicated answer. And I could contradict myself 5 times with that, but that's how I approach all of this stuff, is by looking at things that are not what we're supposed to look for. And that gets the other agencies really to see me as an asset, as opposed to like someone who is a competitor or someone who's going to like, hey, let's go take Pete's source. Pete doesn't have a source. I don't run sources. That's not my job. Right.
Right. Now, how did you, now were they, did you have folks that were coming up on to the camp with pieces of intel that they wanted to provide? Is that what we're talking about? People, how did that happen? I mean,
I would say it's almost the polar opposite of that. Where I would get to is I would say, hey, I'm going to meet Sheikh Bob or Tribal Elder Larry, or Member of Parliament Chris. And I would, if I could get introduced to this guy by the guy I was kind of partnering with, whichever guy it was, they're like, oh, you got to meet Chris. He's the guy you got to talk to. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'll go meet Chris. And this is what I learned, how to meet Chris, right? So I could be introduced to him. Now, how do you get Chris? How do you wow Chris, right? And so I'd go to the gate where I lived, like the E5 runs a gate. He's got guards. I'd say, hey, E5, McGowen, I'm going to be bringing on some Afghan elders who are, if not part of the government, they're part of the informal government. And these are VIPs. And so I want to create a program where you guys don't search them. You just salute and treat them with honor like you would any other VIP. If you are uncomfortable with this, understand I will go to the top and I'll work my way down. But I want to give you a chance to be an NCO and I'll work it with you. I'll give you all the credit for this. But this is going to happen. I've done this a lot of times with other units in the past. I just want to give you this courtesy of letting you know that I'm going to go above you to make this happen if you don't want to do it with me. And usually they'd be like, you know what? I'm not comfortable with that. Yeah, please. I appreciate you telling me, but go above me. So then I go straight to the top. And I'm like, hey, boss, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I've done it in the past. Here's what happens. And they're like, hey, Pete, because at this point they trust me. Whatever you think we need to do. And so I would bring these elders on, right? And I would set it all up. Everything's all good. And I know people in the Army are going to freak the fuck out. But here's what would happen. I would go out to the gate. I'd meet my friend and I'd say, hey, Chris, so glad you're here, man. Thank you so much for coming and meeting me on the camp. I'll come to you next time if you want. And a lot of times these guys are like, no, this is better. I'd rather you meet here. And I'm like, okay, great. And I would walk them on the camp, and the E5 would know his job. He'd bam, salute and everything. And the person's like, oh, yeah, that's right. And so I've given them this honor of respect,
right.
And then I walk them straight to the chow hall and off hours by design. And I'm like, hey, you can have anything you want here, eat anything. And the Army hated that as well. The contract company's like, we can't do that. I'm like, I'll get you a fucking memo. Leave me alone. So I would get them a memo like, hey, Pete can bring on anybody he wants as a guest. And then if I was really on my game, I would let the commander kind of know, like, hey, around this time, if you want to take lunch, it'd be a good time to come by and to say hi to me. I'll be in the chow hall. And he'd come by and be like, who the fuck is Pete talking to now? And so now I'm making cheddar with the boss because I'm meeting with elders he's not met with, doesn't know about. And he could later on look at the report and be like, holy shit, you had this guy who's in charge of these 25,000 people. You had him on my camp? Yeah, I did. And these guys aren't there to blow people up. These guys are there to broker deals. They're trying to create favor. and I don't have any favor to give, but I can create access for them. So they do meet the commander. And so now they're like, man, I just met the commander in a different way. Okay, good. And so the direct collection that's happening is ACEs. All of this other stuff is just fertile ground to create more opportunity for this. And by the way, these guys either have a helper or they have their own phone and they're on it half the time. Pardon me, I've got to take a phone call. And that you get to hear that conversation. I just sit back and lick my ice cream and wait while my buddy, my interpreter, is listening and he's cataloging what they're saying in his head. And so all of this stuff happens because I bring these guys on our camp. I don't go eat their food. They come and eat ours. I show them our electricity. I show them our air conditioning, and it blows their minds. I've got these guys. It's like they're going to the Oscars, right? They can't believe all this stuff that they see. And so they just can't shut up. And they just blah, 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 and just tell everything about anything. I'm like, who should I be talking to? I don't want to harm anybody. I just want to make sure I'm talking to the right people who want to make a difference here. Who else should I talk to? Who should I avoid? All of these questions that are super simple questions for them. And then they give me all this information. And slowly over time, you've met people that nobody else in that unit has ever met and has any chance to meet.
Right. Building rapport.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Through ice cream. And
exactly. Nothing builds rapport like ice cream, really.
Yes.
I mean, it's always been the case. So, well, what else, Pete? What else would you like to talk about? We only have a couple of minutes. So what do you think? Any other?
Take as much time as you want. If you have another question or two, that's fine with me. I mean, you're asking me questions and getting me to talk about things that I don't normally get to talk about. So what else do you want to know?
Before we finish up, when we should have started with this, give me a timeline. Because I know right after 9/11, you went in and as a reservist, and then you went into Egypt and that kind of thing. So give me a timeline as far as yearly, where you went and where you went.
So I left in '96 and redeployed.
Right.
And my Brenna's mom, Jennifer, who is we ended up getting married and getting a divorce, but we get along great. We're all family and everything. It's just, the Army kind of forced our hand. So we got married. Sure. And it didn't work out for us. Right. So no big deal. And there's no hard feelings there. So her orders took her to Huachuca. And so I was able to attach myself to her orders and go to Huachuca. And that's how I got there. That was not by Army design. And because Nancy Richards was there and she got the CIFSO course, Nancy Richards was in the Delta Company unit that Greg and I were in together, you guys. And so Nancy's like, Pete, I'm going to bust you out. So first off, I was the 2 for the 309th as an E4. E4P, which is the promotable grade for not a sergeant. And normally like an E7 fills the slot. So I was fully like 3 ranks below where I should be. And I had all this authority to do stuff. And it was hilarious because I'm just an E4. Shortly after that, I became 85, but it took like 6 months to get promoted and everything. So there was that. And then I got rotated over to CIFSO because Nancy's like, I'm going to bring you with me and get you out of headquarters, get you doing something, because it turns out you just ran sources, realized sources. And you and I, we had the first 2, as far as I know, the first 2 new sources under this new way of doing things. Right. And those that know, and those that don't would never even think to ask or believe it. We had Jason Wood I met Jason Wood. He was out there with you in Georgia. And he was like, do you realize like how important it is that you're at CIFSO and teaching this stuff, because you've actually done it in the way, even then I didn't realize, and for sure the Army didn't realize. And I don't know why it would be that way, that you wouldn't have people who would just, hey, you just ran a source. We're going to give you 2 years of kicking it and just running role plays and teaching agents how to do this stuff. They just don't. Larry was saying yesterday when I'm on the show, it's just not enough of us. There's just not enough of us to get it done. Right. So anyhow, I guess the ultimate answer to that timeline thing is Huachuca. I got out, I got back into the reserves. 9/11 happened. And then I got out because my unit couldn't do the things that we needed to do to get me to stay. And then after I got out, I came back as a contractor for a while, working in support of counterintelligence teams because they didn't have the experience to do what needed to be done. And then after that, I transitioned to the DA civilian side, and I worked on like a temporary, it's really called term. It's like the government contract holds its own old government agency holds its own contract. So you can do things like get help at the hospital, carry a weapon, wear a uniform, and all those things. And so it's a legal answer to the contract problems that come up. And so I got a chance to do all that stuff, and it turned into I don't know, almost a full career when all was said and done. I got done being in combat just about 10 years ago, a little more, like a couple months more than 10 years ago today. I came back and I was like, I'm done with that. And technically 10 years ago, I was still on the government dole because I had so much comp time stacked up that I didn't get done until about September timeframe of 2012. And so from 94 to into the business year of 2012, I was mostly involved with government stuff and deployed 70 months, 1,000 combat missions, all that stuff, which makes me a pretty rare bird. I mean, even amongst like special operators, I'll have more time overseas going out every day than most of those guys do. So that's the timeline. It's just a lot of that. And then getting smarter about it. Now that I'm not at the pace of doing it all the time, I can reflect and think back and learn. Right. I've only gotten better since I've stopped because I can see more long.
Yeah. Now you're great at your job, but you're not doing your job anymore. So
right.
That makes perfect sense.
And ultimately not hireable. Nobody wants to hire me because I knew warlords. I didn't know colonels and generals. Right.
Right. So, exactly. Yeah. So it's a whole different network, I guess.
Yeah.
But well, Pete, that's what I got. I mean, I guess we can wind things up, but no, thanks. That was great. You filled in a lot of the blanks that I had about your past, your history.
Yeah.
So because we definitely worked the same job, but we worked different aspects of the same job.
Right.
So
yeah. And let me just say this for the audience. I don't want to sound arrogant, but when you're good at something, when you're a black belt at something and you have excellent skills, it sounds like, oh, this guy's like a hot shot of everything. But when you can see a lower level of play, it's just a lower level of play. And that's where I play at. And I made a lot of mistakes to get to where I'm at. I've been kicked out of country. I've been kicked off at camps. I mean, I've, made a lot of mistakes to get to where I'm at. And that's where anybody who wants to be better at this kind of collection, you have to accept that you're going to not know enough, but you have to take action. And then you learn over time, if you allow yourself to, that you're like, oh, wow, little less action, a little more contemplation, a little more trust, and I'll go a lot farther. So that's it. That's it for me. Anything in closing before I turn this thing off?
I got nothing. I mean, I'll see you next week, but no, it was good talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. All right, let me run this thing. Hold on one sec. I can get this thing to go where I need it to go. Come on. There it goes. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification.